The sun beat down mercilessly on the narrow mountain trail when Rebecca Harlow's chestnut mare suddenly reared at the sight of a rattlesnake coiled beneath a scrub brush, and in that split second between terror and inevitable pain, strong arms materialized from nowhere and caught her mid-fall, pulling her against a wall of solid muscle that smelled of pine and leather and safety. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she found herself cradled against the broadest chest she had ever encountered. The world had tilted sideways, her mare's frightened whinny still echoing through the canyon, but she was suspended in air, held firmly by someone who had moved faster than seemed humanly possible. Rebecca's breath came in short gasps as she looked up into a face weathered by sun and wind, framed by dark brown hair that fell past his shoulders and eyes the color of mountain stone that studied her with concern. "Easy now," he said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through her. "I have got you." Rebecca realized she was gripping his buckskin shirt with both fists, her knuckles white. The man holding her stood at least 6 feet 3 inches tall, with shoulders that stretched the seams of his shirt and arms corded with muscle that flexed beneath her weight as if she weighed nothing at all. A thick beard covered his jaw, and his skin was tanned dark from years under the open sky. "My horse," she managed to say, her voice shaking. "She is just spooked. She will not go far." He set Rebecca carefully on her feet, keeping one hand on her elbow until he was certain she could stand. "You hurt anywhere?" Rebecca shook her head, still trying to process what had happened. She'd been riding from Castle Dome to the small mining camp where her brother worked, taking the mountain trail because it was shorter despite being more dangerous. The mare had been calm all morning until that damn snake appeared from nowhere. She should have been lying in a broken heap at the bottom of the rocky slope, bones shattered, possibly dead. Instead, she stood here unharmed because this mountain man had appeared like some guardian angel. "I do not understand," she said, looking at the steep drop where she had been about to fall. "You were not on the trail. Where did you come from?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly beneath his beard. "I was checking my trap line up in those rocks, saw you coming along and was about to call out a greeting when your horse started acting strange. Recognized that tensing in her shoulders that meant trouble, so I moved quick." "You jumped down from there?" Rebecca stared at the rocky outcropping 15 feet above the trail, disbelief coloring her voice. "Seemed like the thing to do." He whistled sharply, and Rebecca's mare, who had only gone about 20 yards up the trail, perked her ears and trotted back toward them, reins dragging. The man caught the reins easily and ran his hand along the horse's neck, speaking in low, soothing tones. The mare calmed immediately under his touch, pressing her nose against his shoulder. Rebecca found herself staring at the way his hands moved over her horse, confident and gentle at the same time. He had the largest hands she had ever seen, but they moved with surprising delicacy as he checked the mare for injuries. "She is fine," he announced after a moment, "just scared. That rattler's long gone now." "Thank you," Rebecca said, finally finding her manners. "You saved my life. I am Rebecca Harlow." "Reese Quinton." He offered his hand, and when she placed hers in it, his palm completely engulfed hers. His grip was warm and calloused, the hand of a man who worked with his body every day. "You are a long way from town, Miss Harlow." "I'm going to see my brother at the Copper Canyon camp. He works the claims up there." She straightened her split riding skirt, suddenly aware of how dusty and disheveled she must look. "I ride this trail once a month to bring him supplies and letters from home." Reese frowned, his dark eyes scanning the trail ahead. "This is rough country to be traveling alone, especially for a woman." Rebecca bristled slightly at that, though she could not deny the truth of it. "I can handle myself, usually." "Usually's not good enough out here." His tone was matter-of-fact rather than condescending. "You were lucky this time. Next time you might not be." "I cannot afford to hire an escort," Rebecca said stiffly, "and my brother depends on these supplies. Our parents died 2 years ago, and it is just the two of us now. I do what I must." Something shifted in Reese's expression, a softening around his eyes. "I did not mean any offense. I'm just saying these mountains are dangerous. Snakes are the least of your worries. There are mountain lions, bears, and men worse than either." Rebecca knew he was right. Just last month, a prospector had been found dead on this very trail, his supplies stolen, and his body left for the buzzards. The territorial marshal had come through Castle Dome asking questions, but no one had seen anything. The wild country between the small mining camps attracted desperate men, and the law was thin on the ground. "Where are you headed?" she asked, changing the subject. "I was going into Castle Dome for supplies myself. My cabin is about 5 miles north of here, up in the high country." He studied her for a long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "I will ride with you to Copper Canyon, make sure you get there safe. Then I will head down to town." "That is out of your way," Rebecca protested, though part of her felt relief at the offer. "Cannot be helped. I could not live with myself if something happened to you after pulling you out of one danger just to leave you to another." He walked over to a cluster of rocks and retrieved a magnificent buckskin horse that had been ground-tied there, along with several traps and a pack. The horse was a stallion, tall and powerfully built, matching his owner in both size and presence. Rebecca watched as Reese efficiently secured his traps to his saddle, his movements economical and sure. Everything about him spoke of competence and strength. He wore buckskin pants and a shirt that had seen better days, both fitting snugly over a frame that was pure muscle. A large knife hung at his belt, along with a Colt revolver that looked well maintained. His boots were worn but sturdy, and his hat was battered, felt that had weathered many seasons. "How long have you lived up here?" she asked as he swung into his saddle with easy grace. 5 years, give or take. Came out from Missouri after the war." His voice held a note of finality that suggested he did not discuss that topic further. Rebecca mounted her mare with somewhat less grace, still shaken from her near fall. Reese moved his stallion alongside hers, positioning himself on the outside, between her and the steep drop-off. They began moving up the trail at a steady walk. "You said you come up here once a month?" Reese asked after they had traveled in silence for a while. "Yes, on the 15th, regular as clockwork. Thomas, my brother, he expects me. He worries if I am late." "He should worry. This is no place for a woman alone." Reese glanced at her. "What does he do at the camp?" "He works the sluice boxes mostly, helps with the digging when they need it. The pay is not much, but it is steady, and Mr. Patterson, who runs the operation, is honest. Thomas sends most of his wages back to me, and I run a boarding house in Castle Dome. Between the two of us, we manage." "No husband to help you with that boarding house?" Rebecca felt heat rise to her cheeks. "No, there was someone once, but he went off to seek his fortune in California 3 years ago. I received one letter, then nothing. I suppose he found something better than a girl running a boarding house in an Arizona mining town." "Then he was a fool," Reese said quietly. The simple statement, delivered without flattery or artifice, made Rebecca's heart skip. She studied him from the corner of her eye, this strange mountain man who had dropped from the rocks like some avenging angel. He sat his horse like he had been born in the saddle, his body moving with the animal's rhythm, completely at ease in this harsh landscape. "What about you?" she asked. "No wife waiting in that cabin of yours?" "No, I'm not fit company for civilized folk most days. I like the solitude, the quiet. Just me in the mountains and whatever animals I'm hunting or trapping." He pointed ahead where the trail narrowed considerably. "Stay close here. The footing gets tricky." They navigated the difficult section carefully, Rebecca acutely aware of Reese's constant vigilance. His eyes never stopped moving, scanning the rocks above, the trail ahead, the slopes below. She realized that he was not just watching for dangers to her, but doing what came naturally to him after years alone in these mountains. He was a man completely in his element, reading the land the way she might read a book. When they emerged onto a wider section of trail, Rebecca let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "How much farther to your cabin from here?" Reese pointed to a distant peak. "Up there, tucked into a valley on the far side. There's a stream that runs year-round, good hunting, and enough timber to keep me in firewood through the winter. It is a good spot." "It sounds lonely." "It is. Most times that is how I like it." He turned his stone-gray eyes on her. "But every now and then, it is nice to remember there are other people in the world." They rode in companionable silence for the next hour, the sun climbing higher and turning the air into a furnace. Rebecca was grateful for the canteen of water she had brought, and when she stopped to take a drink, Reese pulled up beside her. "We should rest the horses for a few minutes," he said. "There is shade up ahead under those cottonwoods." They dismounted in the dappled shade, and Rebecca stretched her legs, feeling the tension of the morning scare still lingering in her muscles. Reese led both horses to a small seep where water trickled from the rocks, letting them drink. "You have a good mare there," he said. She recovered from that scare quick enough. I raised her from a foal. Her name is Buttercup, though I know that is foolish. Nothing foolish about naming an animal you care for. Reese stroked the mare's neck. Helps build trust between you. Rebecca found herself relaxing in his presence. There was something steady about him, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt in a long time, not since her parents had died and she had been forced to become harder, more self-reliant. Can I ask you something? She said. You can ask. I might not answer. Why do you live up here alone? A man with your skills could make good money guiding hunters or working as a scout or any number of things. Reese was quiet for a long moment, his hand still on the mare's neck. When he spoke, his voice was low. I saw too much killing during the war, too much death and suffering. When it was over, I could not stomach being around people anymore. Everyone wanted to talk about battles and glory, but there was not any glory in what I saw, so I came out here where it is clean and simple. An animal lives or dies by its instincts and luck, not because some general decided to send men to their deaths for a piece of ground that did not matter. The pain in his voice made Rebecca's throat tight. I'm sorry. I should not have pried. No, it's all right. You have a right to know something about the man riding beside you. He turned to face her fully. I'm not good with people anymore, Miss Harlow. I have forgotten how to make small talk, how to pretend that the everyday worries folks have matter much in the grand scheme. But I remember how to keep someone safe, and I remember what is right and what is wrong. So when I say I will see you to your brother's camp, you can trust that I will do exactly that. I do trust you, Rebecca said, surprised to find it was completely true. You saved my life. That counts for something. They remounted and continued up the trail. As the sun reached its zenith, the heat became oppressive, and Rebecca was grateful when Reese pointed out another rest spot with better shade. They stopped again, and this time Reese pulled some dried venison from his pack and offered it to her. You should eat something. It is still another 2 hours to Copper Canyon. Rebecca accepted the dried meat gratefully, chewing the tough but flavorful jerky. Did you prepare this yourself? I do everything myself up in those mountains. Hunt, trap, smoke meat, cure hides. I come down to town 3 or 4 times a year for supplies I cannot make, like coffee and ammunition, but otherwise I am self-sufficient. That must take considerable skill. It takes practice and patience, and a willingness to go hungry when the hunting is poor. He took a drink from his canteen. But I prefer it to depending on others. A man alone knows exactly where he stands. Rebecca understood that sentiment more than she wanted to admit. After her parents died and her intended had abandoned her, she had learned the same lesson. Depending on others only led to disappointment. What about your brother? Reese asked. He is older or younger than you? Younger by 2 years. He is 22 and I am 24. He wanted to stay and help me run the boarding house, but the work at the mine pays better. He is saving money, hoping to buy his own claim someday. That's a hard dream to achieve. For every man who strikes it rich, 100 more break their backs and their spirits for nothing. I know, but Thomas has always been a dreamer. He needs something to hope for. Rebecca smiled sadly. I suppose we all do. They rode on through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they climbed higher. The saguaro cacti gave way to juniper and pinyon pine, and the air grew slightly less oppressive. Reese maintained his vigilant watch, and several times Rebecca saw him tense slightly, his hand moving toward his revolver, before relaxing again when whatever he had sensed proved harmless. You are very alert, she observed. A man who does not pay attention does not last long out here. I have learned to trust my instincts. They have kept me alive more than once. As they rounded a bend, Reese suddenly held up his hand, signaling her to stop. He dismounted quickly, his movements fluid despite his size, and crouched to examine the trail. What is it? Rebecca asked, keeping her voice low. Tracks. 3 riders, moving fast, heading in the same direction we are. Fresh, maybe an hour old. He stood, his expression grim. They are not prospectors or miners. The horses are too well fed, and they are moving with purpose. Outlaws? Maybe. Or men looking for trouble at the mining camp. He remounted. We need to move faster, but carefully. I want to catch up to them before they reach Copper Canyon, see what their intentions are. Rebecca's heart began to pound again, but for a different reason now. She urged Buttercup forward, keeping pace with Reese's longer-legged stallion. They moved at a fast trot where the trail allowed it, pushing their horses but not so much that they might stumble on the rocky ground. 20 minutes later, Reese held up his hand again, and Rebecca heard it too, voices echoing off the canyon walls ahead. Reese dismounted and motioned for Rebecca to do the same. He led their horses off the trail into a cluster of boulders, then moved forward on foot with Rebecca following close behind. They crept to the edge of an overlook and peered down at the trail below. 3 men sat their horses in a tight group, and even from this distance, Rebecca could see the guns they carried and the hard set of their faces. "We need to hit the payroll wagon before it leaves the camp," one of them was saying, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "Patterson always sends it down to Castle Dome on the 20th. That is 5 days from now. We wait in the rocks by Miller's Pass and take it when it comes through." "What about the guards?" another asked. 2 men with shotguns. We outnumber them, and we will have surprise on our side. Should be easy pickings." Rebecca felt Reese's hand on her shoulder, firm and reassuring. They backed away slowly, not making a sound, until they were safely back with the horses. "We need to warn the camp," Rebecca whispered. "Agreed. But we also need to be careful. If those men spot us, they will know their plan is compromised, and they might do something desperate." Reese checked his revolver, his face set in hard lines. "We will circle around, come at the camp from the north side. It will take longer, but it is safer." They mounted and began the careful detour, moving off the main trail onto rougher ground. It added nearly an hour to their journey, but finally, as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they caught sight of the mining camp below. Copper Canyon was a collection of tents and rough wooden structures clustered along a creek bed. Sluice boxes lined the water, and Rebecca could see men working despite the heat, panning for gold and hauling rock. As they rode in, several miners looked up, and one of them broke into a wide grin. "Rebecca!" Thomas Harlow was a younger, lighter version of his sister, with sandy hair and a ready smile. He dropped the shovel he had been holding and hurried over. "You made good time today. I was not expecting you until—" He stopped short, taking in Reese's imposing presence. "Who is this?" "Thomas, this is Reese Quinton. He saved my life on the trail and escorted me here." "Reese, my brother Thomas." The 2 men shook hands, and Rebecca saw Thomas wince slightly at Reese's grip. "Saved your life? What happened?" "Buttercup threw her at the rattlesnake bend," Reese said. "I happened to be nearby and caught her before she went over the edge." Thomas went pale. "Oh God, Rebecca, you could have been killed." "But I was not, thanks to Mr. Quinton." Rebecca dismounted, grateful to be off her horse after so many hours. "But that is not the only reason we are here. We overheard 3 men planning to rob the payroll wagon when it goes down to Castle Dome." That got everyone's attention. Mr. Patterson, the camp supervisor, emerged from the largest of the wooden buildings, followed by 2 other men Rebecca recognized as the camp guards. Patterson was a stout man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "You are certain of this?" he asked, after Rebecca and Reese had explained what they had heard. "Absolutely certain," Reese said. 3 riders, well armed, and they knew about the payroll schedule. They plan to hit you at Miller's Pass 5 days from now." Patterson swore softly. "That is inside information. Someone must have talked. Or one of them worked here before and knows the routine," Reese suggested. "What do we do?" Thomas asked. "We cannot just cancel the payroll run. The men depend on those wages." "No, but we can set a trap of our own." Patterson looked at Reese appraisingly. "You look like a man who can handle himself in a fight. Would you be willing to help us?" Rebecca's stomach clenched. The thought of Reese riding into danger made her feel sick, which surprised her. She had only known this man for a few hours, but the thought of something happening to him was unbearable. "I am willing," Reese said, "but we need to be smart about it. If we can take these men alive, the marshal can get information from them about who else might be involved." They spent the next hour planning. It was decided that the payroll wagon would run on schedule, but with additional guards hidden in the wagon bed under a canvas. Reese would position himself in the rocks above Miller's Pass, where he could provide cover fire if needed. 2 other experienced miners would join him. As the meeting broke up and the men returned to their work, Thomas pulled Rebecca aside. "You should stay here tonight. It is too late to ride back to Castle Dome now." I brought my bedroll. I was planning to camp here and head back in the morning, like always. Good. Come on, I will show you where you can set up, and I want to hear more about this Reese Quinton. He seems like quite a character. Rebecca followed her brother to a spot near the creek where she usually made camp when she visited. As she unpacked her supplies, she saw Reese across the way, talking with Patterson and the guards, his tall frame towering over the other men. He is just a mountain man who was in the right place at the right time, Rebecca said, but even to her own ears the words sounded hollow. Rebecca, I saw the way you were looking at him, and the way he was watching over you. That is more than just good fortune bringing you together. Do not be ridiculous. I barely know him. Sometimes that's all it takes. Remember how Pa always said he knew Ma was the one the moment he saw her? Rebecca did remember. Her father had told that story dozens of times, how he had seen their mother at a church social and known instantly that she was the woman he would marry. Rebecca had always thought it was romantic nonsense, but now, thinking about the moment Reese's arms had caught her, the instant connection she had felt, she wondered if perhaps her father had been onto something. Thomas helped her set up her small tent and build a fire. As darkness fell, the mining camp settled into its evening routine. Men gathered around fires, sharing food and stories. Rebecca prepared a simple meal of beans and cornbread, and to her surprise, Reese appeared at her fire as she was dishing it up. Mind if I join you? I have been eating my own cooking for so long, the smell of someone else's food is mighty appealing. Please, sit, there is plenty. Rebecca handed him a plate, very aware of Thomas watching the exchange with poorly concealed interest. Reese folded his large frame down by the fire with surprising grace. He ate with good manners, Rebecca noticed, not wolfing his food despite what must have been hunger after the long ride. This is excellent, he said after a few bites. You are a fine cook, Miss Harlow. Please, call me Rebecca. After everything today, I think we can dispense with formalities. Rebecca, then, and you should call me Reese. They ate in companionable silence for a while, the crackling fire and the distant sound of the creek providing a peaceful backdrop. Thomas excused himself, saying he needed to check on something, though Rebecca suspected he was simply giving them privacy. Thank you again, Rebecca said when they were alone, for everything today, not just saving me from the fall, but escorting me here, and now agreeing to help with these outlaws. You did not have to do any of that. Yes, I did, Reese said simply. It was the right thing to do. Most men would not see it that way. Most men would have gone about their business and left me to manage on my own. Then most men are fools. Reese set down his plate and looked at her directly. Rebecca, I want to be honest with you. When I caught you today, something happened. I cannot explain it, and maybe it does not make sense, but I felt something I have not felt in years, a connection, a purpose beyond just surviving day to day in those mountains. Rebecca's heart was hammering again, but not from fear this time. I felt it too, she admitted quietly. I thought I was imagining it. You were not. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, and took her hand. His palm dwarfed hers, warm and calloused and strong. I know this is sudden. We just met today. But I learned during the war that life is too short and too uncertain to waste time on pretending or playing games. I would like to get to know you better, if you would allow it. I would like that too, Rebecca said, her voice barely above a whisper. They sat holding hands by the firelight, and Rebecca felt something shift inside her, like a door that had been locked for years suddenly opening. She had built walls around her heart after her parents died, and her intended left, convinced that self-reliance was the only path forward. But here was this man, this powerful, scarred, solitary mountain man, offering her something she had thought lost forever. Hope. Tell me about your cabin, she said. What is it like up there? Reese's face softened as he described his home in the high country. He told her about the valley where deer came to drink from the stream, about the stand of aspen trees that turned gold in autumn, about winter nights when the snow fell silent and heavy and the world seemed to hold its breath. He spoke of solitude, but also of beauty, and Rebecca found herself enchanted by his words. It sounds wonderful, she said. It is, but it is also empty. He squeezed her hand gently. I did not realize how empty until today. They talked long into the night, sharing stories of their lives. Rebecca told him about growing up in Missouri, about the journey west after the war when her father had sought a fresh start, about building a life in Castle Dome only to have it shattered by illness and abandonment. Reese shared carefully chosen pieces of his past: a farm in Missouri, a family lost to cholera before the war, 4 years of fighting that had left scars on his soul deeper than any physical wound. "I was a sniper," he said, staring into the fire. "They picked me because I was big enough to handle the heavy rifles, and I did not miss. I spent 4 years shooting men from distances they never saw me at, watching them fall, knowing I had ended their lives. By the end, I could not tell you which side was right or wrong. I just knew I was tired of death." "Is that why you came to the mountains? To escape all that?" "Partly. But also because I could not figure out how to live in a world where I was supposed to pretend those things had not happened. Everyone wanted to either glorify the war or forget it, and I could not do either. Up in the mountains, I do not have to pretend. I can just be." Rebecca understood that more than he knew. After her parents died, she had gotten so tired of people in town offering empty platitudes and false comfort. Working, keeping busy, maintaining the boarding house, those things made sense. Emotions, grief, longing, those were harder to navigate. "I think you are one of the bravest men I have ever met," she said. Reese looked at her in surprise. "Brave? I ran away from the world." "No, you survived something terrible and found a way to keep going. That takes more courage than most people will ever need." His grip on her hand tightened, and for a moment Rebecca thought he might say something more, but then Thomas returned, yawning dramatically. "I hate to interrupt, but I am exhausted, and some of us have to be up at dawn to work the sluices," he said with a grin. Reese stood, reluctantly releasing Rebecca's hand. "I should let you rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." "Where will you sleep?" Rebecca asked. "I will find a spot. I am used to sleeping rough." "There is an extra bedroll in my supplies," Thomas offered. "You're welcome to it." "I appreciate that." Reese looked down at Rebecca, his expression difficult to read in the firelight. "Sleep well, Rebecca." "You too, Reese." She watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness beyond the firelight, and already she felt his absence like a physical ache. Thomas sat down beside her with a knowing look. "So, when is the wedding?" "Thomas?" Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "I am just saying, I have never seen you look at anyone the way you look at him, and he clearly feels the same. The man could not take his eyes off you all through dinner. We just met today." "So, sometimes that's all it takes. He seems like a good man, Rebecca. A bit rough around the edges, sure, but solid. And he saved your life. That has to count for something." Rebecca pulled her knees up to her chest, staring into the fire. "What if I'm just imagining this? What if it is just gratitude because he saved me?" "Is that what you think it is?" She considered the question honestly. "No, it feels like more. It feels like something important." "Then trust that feeling. You have been alone long enough, sis. You deserve some happiness." They sat together a while longer. Then Thomas banked the fire and headed to the tent he shared with 3 other miners. Rebecca crawled into her own small tent, but sleep was elusive. She kept replaying the day in her mind, the terror of falling, the strength of Reese's arms, the sound of his voice, the way his hand had felt holding hers. Somewhere in the darkness she heard an owl hoot, and she wondered if Reese was still awake too, thinking of her the way she was thinking of him. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Rebecca rose early and rekindled her fire, starting coffee and frying up bacon and eggs from the supplies she had brought. She had just finished cooking when Reese appeared, looking somewhat refreshed despite sleeping on the hard ground. "That smells amazing," he said. "Sit, eat. You will need your strength for the ride down to Castle Dome." Rebecca handed him a full plate and a cup of coffee. "About that," Reese said after taking a long drink of coffee, "I was thinking I might adjust my schedule. Instead of heading straight down to town, I could escort you back. Make sure you get home safe after what happened yesterday." Rebecca's heart lifted. "I would like that. But what about your supplies? They can wait another day. You are more important." The simple statement made Rebecca's breath catch. She busied herself with her own breakfast to hide her reaction, but she felt Reese's eyes on her, warm and attentive. Thomas joined them for breakfast, and the 3 of them ate together as the mining camp came to life around them. Men emerged from tents, fires were lit, and the constant sound of work began. Picks striking stone, shovels scraping gravel, water sluicing through the boxes. "You will be back in 5 days for the payroll run?" Thomas asked Reese. "I will be here, and I will bring a couple of friends who can be trusted. Old soldiers I know who settled in the area. They will be glad to help." After breakfast, Rebecca and Reese prepared for the journey back to Castle Dome. Rebecca said goodbye to Thomas, hugging him tightly. "Be careful," she whispered. "I worry about you up here." "I will be fine, but you be careful on that trail. Even with your mountain man protecting you." Thomas grinned at Reese. "You take good care of my sister, you hear?" "You have my word," Reese said solemnly. They mounted up and began the journey back down the mountain trail. The morning air was cool, a brief respite before the afternoon heat would set in. Rebecca noticed that Reese seemed more relaxed today, more willing to talk as they rode. "Tell me about your boarding house," he said. "How many rooms?" 8 rooms for boarders, plus my own quarters. I usually have 6 or 7 rooms occupied at any given time. Mostly miners and prospectors passing through, a few merchants who come to town regularly. I provide breakfast and dinner as part of the room fee, so I do a lot of cooking." "Sounds like hard work." "It is, but I like staying busy. And it allows me to make enough to support myself and help Thomas. After my parents died, the boarding house was all I had. I could not let it fail." "You are a strong woman, Rebecca." "I had to be. There was no other choice." They rode in silence for a while, navigating the tricky sections of trail with care. When they reached the spot where Rebecca had nearly fallen the day before, she could not help but shudder. Reese noticed immediately. "You all right?" "Just remembering. If you had not been there. But I was there, and you are safe." He reached over and briefly took her hand, a gesture of comfort that made her feel warm despite the morning chill. "Try not to dwell on what might have been. Focus on what is." They continued down the mountain, and as the trail widened and became safer, they rode side by side, talking about everything and nothing. Rebecca learned that Reese loved to read but rarely had access to books, that he played the harmonica to pass long winter evenings, that he had once thought about becoming a school teacher before the war changed everything. A school teacher? Rebecca could not help but smile at the image of this massive, bearded mountain man standing in front of a classroom. "I know it sounds strange now, but I liked learning when I was young, and I thought it would be a good life. Peaceful, meaningful," he shrugged. "But that was a different man in a different time. You could still do it. After the war, plenty of men changed their paths. I do not think the children would take well to being taught by someone like me. I would probably scare them half to death. I think you underestimate yourself. You are gentle when you want to be. I saw it with my horse, and I felt it when you caught me. You have strong hands, but they know how to be tender." Reese looked at her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. "You see more than most people do. Maybe I'm just paying closer attention than most people." By noon, they had made good time and stopped to rest the horses near a spring Reese knew about. They ate cold biscuits and jerky in the shade, and Rebecca found herself studying Reese when she thought he was not looking. Everything about him fascinated her. The way he moved with such economy and purpose, the way his eyes constantly scanned their surroundings, the way his presence made her feel utterly safe. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching her watching him. Rebecca felt her cheeks heat. "I was thinking about how different you are from anyone I've ever met." "Different good or different bad?" "Different wonderful," she said honestly. Reese set down the biscuit he had been eating and turned to face her fully. "Rebecca, I need to be straight with you about something. I'm not an easy man to care about. I have long silences where I do not talk for days. I get restless if I am away from the mountains too long. I am not social, and I do not enjoy town life. If something were to develop between us, you would need to understand that I am set in my ways." "Are you trying to warn me off?" Rebecca asked, her heart sinking. "No, God, no. I'm trying to be honest about who I am so you know what you would be getting into. Because I have to tell you, Rebecca Harlow, I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I caught you yesterday. You have gotten under my skin in a way I did not think was possible anymore. But I do not want you to have illusions about me. I am not a fairy tale hero. I am just a man with more scars than most." Rebecca reached out and placed her hand on his bearded cheek, feeling the warmth of his skin, the roughness of his whiskers. "I do not want a fairy tale hero. I want someone real, someone honest, someone who looks at me the way you do, like I matter." "You do matter," Reese said, his voice rough with emotion. He covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face. "You matter more than you know." They sat there for a long moment, the connection between them almost tangible. Then Reese leaned forward slowly, giving Rebecca every chance to pull away, and kissed her. His lips were surprisingly soft beneath his beard, gentle despite his size and strength. The kiss was tender, questioning, and Rebecca answered by pressing closer, her free hand coming up to rest on his broad shoulder. She felt Reese's arm come around her waist, strong and sure, pulling her against him. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Reese rested his forehead against hers, his gray eyes intense. "I have been wanting to do that since yesterday," he admitted. "I'm glad you did," Rebecca whispered. They stayed there in the shade for a while longer, holding each other, neither wanting to break the spell. Finally, practical considerations forced them to move. They still had several hours of riding before they would reach Castle Dome. The afternoon portion of the journey passed in a haze of happiness for Rebecca. She and Reese rode close together, hands occasionally reaching out to touch, conversation flowing easily. They talked about hopes and dreams, about the future, about possibilities. Reese admitted that he had been thinking about spending less time alone in the mountains, perhaps finding a way to be part of the world again without drowning in it. "I think you could help with that," he said. "You are grounded in a way I have not been for years. You have responsibilities, connections, a place in the community. Being around you makes me think maybe I could have those things too, without losing myself." "What would that look like?" Rebecca asked, her heart hopeful. "I do not know yet, but I would like to find out. With you, if you are willing." "I am willing," Rebecca said without hesitation. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, the buildings of Castle Dome came into view in the valley below. The town was small, just a main street with perhaps 30 buildings, but it was home. Rebecca's boarding house was on the north end of town, a 2-story structure with a wide porch that she took pride in maintaining. They rode into town in the early evening, drawing some curious looks from people on the street. Rebecca knew there would be talk. A woman arriving with a strange mountain man would certainly set tongues wagging, but she found she did not care. "That's my place," she said, pointing to the boarding house. Reese helped her dismount, his hands lingering on her waist longer than necessary. They unloaded her supplies from Buttercup, and Rebecca led them both around back to the small stable where she kept her horse. "Would you like to come in?" she asked. "I could make dinner and you could stay the night if you wanted. I have a room available. I should probably camp outside of town. I'm not much for walls and crowds." Rebecca tried to hide her disappointment. "Of course, I understand." Reese lifted her chin with one finger. "But I will be back, day after tomorrow, and then we will ride up to Copper Canyon together for the payroll run, all right?" "All right," Rebecca managed to smile. "Promise?" "I promise." He kissed her again, right there in the fading light, not caring who might see. "Take care of yourself, Rebecca. I will be thinking about you every minute I am gone." "I will be thinking of you too." Rebecca watched him ride away, his tall figure on the buckskin stallion gradually disappearing into the dusk. Her heart felt full and aching at the same time, and she realized with a start that she was falling in love with Reese Quinton. The next 2 days passed slowly. Rebecca threw herself into her work at the boarding house, cooking and cleaning and tending to her guests. But her mind was always on Reese. She wondered what he was doing up in his mountain cabin, whether he was thinking of her as much as she was thinking of him. On the second evening, as promised, Reese appeared at her door just as she was serving dinner to her boarders. He had cleaned up, his hair damp and his beard trimmed, though he still wore his buckskin clothes. He looked massive standing in her doorway, and she saw her guest's eyes widen at the sight of him. "Reese," Rebecca could not keep the joy from her voice. "Come in, please. Have you eaten?" "I have not. I rode straight here from the cabin." Rebecca quickly set another place at the table, and Reese joined them for dinner. Her boarders were curious about this stranger, and Rebecca introduced him as the man who had saved her life on the trail. The story came out, growing slightly in the telling, and by the end of the meal, Reese was being treated like a hero. After dinner, Rebecca and Reese sat on the front porch while the evening cooled. Castle Dome was quiet at this hour, the saloon down the street providing distant music, but otherwise the town settling into rest. "I missed you," Reese said quietly. 2 days, and I missed you like I had been gone 2 months. That has never happened to me before." "I missed you too. The house felt emptier than usual, even with all my boarders here." "I brought you something." Reese reached into his shirt and pulled out a small carved figure. It was a horse, delicately crafted from a piece of golden wood, every detail perfect. "I made this for you, to remember Buttercup and the day we met." Rebecca took the carving, tears springing to her eyes. "Reese, this is beautiful. You made this in 2 days." "I worked on it at night by firelight. I could not sleep anyway, so I might as well make something useful with my hands." He looked almost embarrassed. "I used to whittle a lot during the war. It helped calm my mind." "Thank you." Rebecca held the little horse carefully, as if it were made of glass instead of wood. "I will treasure this always." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, Rebecca's head resting on Reese's shoulder, his arm around her waist. It felt right, being like this, as if they had been together for years instead of just days. "Tomorrow we ride to Copper Canyon," Reese said eventually. "I will meet you here at first light. I am bringing 2 men with me, friends I trust. We will make sure those outlaws do not succeed in their robbery." "Be careful," Rebecca said, fear creeping into her voice. "I just found you. I do not want to lose you." "You will not lose me," Reese turned to face her, his expression serious. "I have survived war and 5 years alone in the mountains. A few outlaws are not going to take me down. Besides, I have something to live for now. That changes everything." He kissed her goodnight on the porch, a long, deep kiss that promised more for the future. Then he reluctantly pulled away and headed to his horse. "Until tomorrow," he called back. "Until tomorrow," Rebecca echoed, watching him disappear into the night. The next morning arrived with pink streaks across the eastern sky. Rebecca was already awake and dressed, having slept poorly with worry about the coming confrontation. She had prepared supplies for the journey and was loading them onto Buttercup when she heard horses approaching. Reese appeared with 2 other men, both weathered and capable looking. He introduced them as Cole Sanders and Wyatt Frost, former soldiers who had settled in the territory after the war. "Madam," Cole said, tipping his hat. He was lean and wiry, with quick eyes and a ready smile. "Pleased to meet you, Miss Harlow," Wyatt added. He was broader than Cole, with iron gray hair and a serious demeanor. "Thank you for coming," Rebecca said. "My brother and the other miners will be grateful for your help." "Reese said you were worth riding into trouble for," Wyatt said. "That is high praise from him. He does not say much about anything usually." They set off as the sun crested the horizon, making good time on the trail. Reese rode beside Rebecca, while Cole and Wyatt flanked them. The 2 veterans were clearly experienced riders and fighters, moving with the same alert watchfulness that Reese displayed. As they climbed into the mountains, Reese explained the plan. "We will arrive at Copper Canyon tonight and position ourselves before dawn tomorrow. The payroll wagon leaves at first light, and if those outlaws stick to their plan, they will try to take it at Miller's Pass around mid-morning. We will be ready for them." "What do you want us to do?" Cole asked. "Wyatt, you and I will be in the rocks above the pass with rifles. Cole, you will be hidden in the wagon with one of the camp guards. Rebecca's brother Thomas will drive the wagon with the other guard riding shotgun. When the outlaws make their move, we take them from above while you provide cover from the wagon." "Sounds like a good plan," Wyatt said. "What about Miss Harlow?" "She stays at the camp where it is safe," Reese said firmly. Rebecca opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. As much as she wanted to help, she knew she would only be a liability in a gunfight. Better to stay out of the way and let these experienced men handle it. They reached Copper Canyon as the sun was setting. Thomas was relieved to see them, and Mr. Patterson welcomed the additional help gratefully. That evening, the plan was reviewed and refined. Rebecca noticed how naturally Reese took command, his military experience showing through. The other men listened to him with respect, following his directions without question. That night, Rebecca could not sleep. She lay in her tent, listening to the sounds of the camp, worrying about what tomorrow would bring. Finally, unable to stand it any longer, she rose and walked down to the creek. She found Reese there, sitting on a rock and watching the water flow past. He looked up as she approached. "Could not sleep either?" he asked. "Too worried." Rebecca sat beside him. "What if something goes wrong? What if someone gets hurt? Then we deal with it. But Rebecca, I have been in dozens of fights. I know how to read situations, how to anticipate problems. We will be fine. You cannot promise that. No, I cannot. He took her hand. But I can promise that I will do everything in my power to come back to you. Because what we have here, what is growing between us that is worth fighting for, worth living for. Rebecca leaned against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. When this is over, what happens next? That depends. What do you want to happen? I want you to stay, not forever up in those mountains alone, but here, with me. I know that is asking a lot and you love your solitude, but... Rebecca. Reese turned to face her, his hands cupping her face. I would give up that cabin tomorrow if it meant being with you. These last few days have shown me something I did not realize I was missing. A reason to be part of the world again. A reason to care about tomorrow. You've given me that. Really? Really? When this business with the outlaws is done, we will figure out how to make this work. Maybe I keep the cabin but spend more time in town. Maybe I find work closer to Castle Dome. Maybe you come up to the mountains sometimes, and I come down to the town sometimes. We will find a way. I would like that, Rebecca whispered. They kissed there by the creek, the water providing a gentle soundtrack to their tender moment. When they finally pulled apart, Reese walked Rebecca back to her tent. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be over before you know it, and then we can start planning our future. Rebecca slept a little better after that, comforted by Reese's words and his confidence. When she woke before dawn, the camp was already stirring. Men moved quietly in the darkness, preparing for the day ahead. Rebecca found Thomas checking the team that would pull the payroll wagon. Be careful, she told him, hugging him tight. I will. Reese knows what he is doing. I trust him. So do I. She watched as the men prepared. Reese, Wyatt, and 2 miners would ride out first to position themselves in the rocks above Miller's Pass. Cole would hide in the back of the wagon under a canvas tarp, along with one of the camp guards. Thomas would drive with the other guard beside him. Reese came to say goodbye before leaving. He pulled Rebecca into a fierce embrace, his arms tight around her. Stay safe, she whispered against his chest. Always. I've got too much to live for now. He kissed her forehead, then mounted his stallion and rode out with the others. The next few hours were agony for Rebecca. She tried to help with camp chores, but her mind was at Miller's Pass. She kept imagining all the things that could go wrong. The outlaws could have changed their plans. There could be more than 3 of them. Someone could get shot. Mr. Patterson kept glancing at his pocket watch. The wagon should reach the pass in about 30 minutes, he said around 10 o'clock. If everything goes according to plan, we should know the outcome within the hour. Rebecca paced, unable to sit still. Other miners watched her with sympathy, understanding her worry. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. At Miller's Pass, Reese lay belly down on a large flat rock, his rifle positioned and ready. Wyatt was 20 feet to his left, similarly positioned. Below, they had a clear view of the trail where it narrowed between 2 rock walls, the perfect place for an ambush. There, Wyatt said quietly, pointing. 3 riders were moving into position in the rocks on the far side of the pass. Even from this distance, Reese could see their weapons and their focused attention on the trail. Right on schedule, Reese murmured. He shifted slightly, getting more comfortable. His body remembered this, the patient waiting, the complete focus. But this time was different. He was not fighting for some abstract cause or following orders. He was protecting Rebecca's brother and the other good men who depended on that payroll. He was fighting for something that mattered. The sound of wagon wheels and horses carried up from the trail. The payroll wagon came into view, Thomas driving with steady hands, the guard beside him scanning the rocks with his shotgun ready. The outlaws waited until the wagon was fully in the narrows. Then, one of them stood up and fired a shot into the air. "Hold up there! This is a robbery!" Thomas pulled the horses to a stop, his hands raised as if in surrender. The 3 outlaws emerged from their hiding places, guns drawn, moving toward the wagon with confident swagger. "Just hand over the payroll box and nobody gets hurt," the leader called out. That was when Reese fired. His shot took the leader's hat clean off his head, and Wyatt's shot kicked up dirt between the other 2 outlaws in the wagon. "Drop your weapons!" Reese's voice boomed through the pass. "You are surrounded!" For a moment, the outlaws froze, trying to figure out where the shots had come from. Then, one of them made a fatal mistake. He fired at the wagon. The guard and Cole immediately returned fire, and chaos erupted. Reese put another shot between the outlaws, aiming not to kill, but to convince them they were beaten. Wyatt did the same from his position. The crossfire was devastating. Within seconds, two of the outlaws had thrown down their weapons, hands raised. The third made a run for the horses, but one of the miners Reese had brought fired a shot that dropped him, a clean wound to the leg that stopped him without killing him. The entire fight lasted less than 2 minutes. Reese and Wyatt climbed down from their positions while the miners emerged from hiding. The three outlaws were quickly disarmed and tied up, the wounded one getting his leg bandaged. "Anyone hurt on our side?" Reese asked as he reached the wagon. "Not a scratch," Thomas said, his voice shaking slightly with adrenaline. "That was incredible shooting. You took control of the situation before they even knew what hit them." "That was the plan." Reese examined the captured outlaws. "You boys picked the wrong payroll to rob. The territorial marshal's going to be very interested in talking to you." The leader, a rough-looking character who was still missing his hat, glared at Reese. "How did you know we were coming?" "Your mistake was being loud enough for people to hear your plans. Next time, pick somewhere more private to discuss your crimes, though I suspect there will not be a next time for you." They loaded the outlaws into the wagon bed and continued down to Castle Dome, arriving in early afternoon. The town marshal, a competent older man named Jim Hawkins, took custody of the prisoners and listened to the full story. "You did good work," Hawkins told Reese. "These three have been suspected in at least 4 other robberies in the territory. The Marshal Service has been looking for them for months. There is probably a reward." "Split it among the men who helped," Reese said. "I do not need it." After giving their statements, the group returned to Copper Canyon where Rebecca waited anxiously. The moment she saw them coming up the trail, safe and whole, she ran to meet them. "Thomas," she grabbed her brother in a tight hug. "You're all right?" "I'm fine. Reese and the others had everything under control." Thomas grinned. It was actually exciting. But Rebecca had already moved past him to Reese. She threw her arms around his neck, and he caught her easily, lifting her off her feet. "You came back," she said, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I promised I would." He set her down but kept his arms around her. "It is over, Rebecca. The outlaws are in custody, the payroll is safe, and nobody on our side got hurt." That evening, Mr. Patterson threw an impromptu celebration at the camp. Someone produced a bottle of whiskey, and toasts were made to the men who had saved the payroll. Rebecca sat close to Reese, her hand in his, watching the men celebrate and feeling profound relief that it had all worked out. "What now?" she asked him quietly. "Nay, now we go back to Castle Dome. I talked to your marshal about maybe doing some scouting work for the territory. Nothing too demanding, but enough to earn money without being gone from you for too long, and I court you properly, the way you deserve." Rebecca's heart swelled. "You want to court me?" "I want to marry you," Reese said bluntly, "but I figure we should do things in the proper order: court, engagement, wedding, unless you are opposed to any of that." "I am not opposed to any of that," Rebecca said, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. They left Copper Canyon the next morning, Reese's friends riding with them part of the way before heading to their own homes. By evening, they were back in Castle Dome, and this time when they arrived, Rebecca did not hesitate to invite Reese inside. "Stay tonight, in one of the guest rooms," she added quickly, mindful of propriety, "but stay. I do not want you going back up to that cabin just yet." "All right," Reese agreed. The next few weeks fell into a pattern. Reese split his time between his cabin and Castle Dome, but he spent more and more time in town. True to his word, he spoke with Marshal Hawkins about work, and soon he was making regular patrols of the mining trails, helping to escort payroll wagons and keep the routes safe for travelers. The work paid reasonably well and kept him close to Rebecca. For her part, Rebecca found herself happier than she had been in years. Reese courted her with quiet determination, bringing her wildflowers from the mountains, helping with repairs around the boarding house that needed a strong back and skilled hands, sitting with her on the porch in the evenings and talking about everything and nothing. The town gradually got used to seeing the big mountain man around. Some were initially wary of him, but Reese's actions spoke louder than his intimidating appearance. He helped a widow fix her roof without being asked. He stopped a fight outside the saloon before it could turn deadly. He found a lost child in the desert and brought her home safely. 3 months after they met on a cool autumn evening, Reese took Rebecca for a walk outside of town. They climbed a small hill that overlooked Castle Dome, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "Rebecca," Reese said, taking both her hands in his, "these months with you have been the happiest of my life. You have given me something I did not think I would ever have again, a future worth looking forward to. I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your spirit. I love how you see the best in people, including me. I love how you make me want to be a better man." He dropped to one knee, pulling a simple gold ring from his pocket. "Will you marry me? Will you take a rough mountain man as your husband and let me spend the rest of my life proving how much you mean to me?" "Yes," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes. I love you too, Reese. From the moment you caught me, I think I loved you." He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood sweeping her into his arms and kissing her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally pulled apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. They were married 6 weeks later in the small church in Castle Dome. Thomas gave Rebecca away, beaming with pride. Cole and Wyatt stood up with Reese, and half the town turned out to witness the ceremony. Rebecca wore her mother's wedding dress, carefully preserved, and Reese wore new clothes purchased for the occasion, though he drew the line at shaving his beard. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Reese kissed Rebecca with such tenderness that several ladies in the congregation had to dab at their eyes. The reception was held at the boarding house, which Rebecca's guests had helped decorate. There was food, music, and dancing. Reese, who claimed not to know how to dance, proved surprisingly graceful when he took his bride in his arms and waltzed her around the main room. "You lied about not knowing how to dance," Rebecca accused him playfully. "I said I was not good with people, not that I could not dance. My mother made sure I learned before I went off to war. She said a gentleman should know how to dance with a lady." "Your mother raised you well." "She would have loved you," Reese said, his voice soft. "She would have been so happy to see me settled with someone like you." As the evening wore on and the guests began to leave, Rebecca and Reese finally had a moment alone on the porch. They stood wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Happy?" Reese asked. "More than I can say. You?" "I did not know I could be this happy. For so long, I thought I was broken beyond repair. But you fixed me, Rebecca. You made me whole again." They spent their wedding night in Rebecca's quarters at the boarding house, and if any of the guests heard sounds of joy and passion from those rooms, they were polite enough not to mention it the next morning. In the days and weeks that followed, Rebecca and Reese settled into married life. Reese officially moved into the boarding house, and his presence there proved to be an asset. His size and reputation meant that troublesome guests thought twice about causing problems. He helped with the heavy work, and his skills at hunting and trapping meant they always had meat on the table. Rebecca found that she loved being married to Reese. He was thoughtful and attentive, always making sure she knew how much he valued her. He listened when she talked about her day, helped her with problems at the boarding house, and held her close at night when the desert wind howled outside. For his part, Reese discovered that married life suited him far better than he had expected. Coming home to Rebecca each evening gave him a sense of peace he had not felt since before the war. Her love and acceptance healed parts of him he had thought permanently scarred. They still made trips up to his cabin in the mountains, spending days at a time in that remote valley. Rebecca loved it there, understanding why Reese had sought solitude in such a beautiful place. They hiked, fished, and spent long evenings sitting by the fire, while Reese played his harmonica and Rebecca read aloud from books. "We could spend more time here if you want," Reese offered one evening as they sat watching the sunset from the cabin's small porch. "I like visiting, but I think Castle Dome is home now," Rebecca said. "The boarding house, our life there, that is where we belong. But coming here is a nice escape." "I agree. I thought I would miss the solitude more, but being with you is better than any solitude could ever be." A year after their wedding, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. Reese's reaction was a mixture of joy and terror. "I do not know how to be a father," he admitted, his hand resting gently on Rebecca's still flat stomach. "What if I am not good at it?" "You will be wonderful," Rebecca assured him. "You are patient, kind, and protective. Those are exactly the qualities a father needs." "I will do my best. That is all I can promise." "That is all I ask." Rebecca's pregnancy progressed smoothly. Reese was attentive to the point of being overprotective, insisting she not lift heavy things or overwork herself. He took on more of the boarding house duties, and their guests found themselves warming to the quiet giant who moved carefully around the pregnant woman and watched her with such obvious devotion. Thomas visited frequently, excited about becoming an uncle. He had been promoted to foreman at the Copper Canyon mine and was doing well for himself. "You two are disgustingly happy," he teased one evening over dinner. "It is almost annoying." "You should find someone yourself," Rebecca suggested. "There's a nice young woman who works at the general store who asks about you every time I see her." Thomas blushed. "Mary? She asks about me?" "Every time. Maybe you should ask her to the next town social." "Maybe I will," Thomas said, looking thoughtful. On a warm spring evening, Rebecca went into labor. The local midwife was summoned, and Reese found himself banished to the main room of the boarding house while the women tended to his wife. He paced like a caged animal, jumping at every sound from upstairs. "Sit down before you wear a hole in the floor," Cole Sanders advised. He and Wyatt had come as soon as they heard Rebecca was in labor, providing moral support for their friend. "I cannot sit. What if something goes wrong? What if Rebecca needs me?" "The midwife knows what she is doing," Wyatt said calmly, "and Rebecca is strong. She will be fine." But Reese could not shake his worry. He had survived a war and 5 years alone in the wilderness, but nothing had prepared him for the terror of waiting while the woman he loved brought new life into the world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only a few hours, a baby's cry pierced the air. Reese froze, his heart in his throat. The midwife appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling. "Mr. Quinton, you can come up now. Your wife wants to see you." Reese took the stairs 3 at a time. He burst into the bedroom to find Rebecca propped up against pillows, looking exhausted but radiant, holding a small bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Reese approached slowly, almost afraid. Rebecca pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny red face, eyes scrunched closed, a small fist waving in the air. "A son," Reese whispered, awe in his voice. "Do you want to hold him?" Reese sat carefully on the edge of the bed, and Rebecca placed the baby in his large hands. The infant looked impossibly small against Reese's muscular frame, but he held the child with infinite gentleness, supporting the tiny head carefully. "He is perfect," Reese said, his voice rough with emotion. "Rebecca, he is perfect. What should we name him?" They had discussed names but never settled on one. Now, looking at his son, Reese knew exactly what felt right. "Robert," he said, "after my father, Robert James Quinton." "Robert James Quinton," Rebecca repeated, smiling. "I like it. Welcome to the world, little Robert." The baby opened his eyes, dark like his father's, and seemed to look directly at Reese. In that moment, Reese felt something shift in his heart, an expansion of love he had not known was possible. He had thought his capacity for love was filled by Rebecca, but now he realized love did not work that way. It did not divide, it multiplied. "I promise I will protect you," he whispered to his son. "I will teach you everything I know. I will be the best father I can be." "You already are," Rebecca said, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. The first few weeks with a newborn were exhausting, but wonderful. Reese proved to be a surprisingly natural father, getting up for late-night feedings, walking the floor with Robert when the baby was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. He was so gentle with the infant that Rebecca sometimes had to stop and watch, her heart overflowing at the sight of her massive bearded husband cradling their tiny son with such tenderness. Their boarding house guests were charmed by the baby, and several of the older women gave Rebecca advice and help. The community rallied around the young family, and Rebecca realized how much she had come to love Castle Dome and the people in it. As Robert grew from infant to toddler, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Reese continued his work patrolling the mining trails, but he never stayed away longer than necessary. He always came home to Rebecca and Robert, and nothing in his life had ever felt more right. Thomas did indeed court Mary from the general store, and 2 years after Robert's birth, they had a wedding of their own. Rebecca and Reese stood up with them, and little Robert served as an enthusiastic, if somewhat clumsy, ring-bearer. On Robert's third birthday, Rebecca had news for Reese. "We are going to have another baby," she told him as they sat together on the porch swing, watching their son play in the yard. Reese's face lit up with joy. "Really? When?" "Winter, I think. Maybe January or February." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love you, Rebecca Quinton. You have given me everything I never knew I needed." "And you have given me the same," Rebecca replied. "I think about that day on the trail when you caught me, and I cannot imagine what my life would be like if you had not been there." "I was meant to be there. We were meant to find each other." "Do you miss the solitude sometimes? The cabin, the mountains, the life you had before?" Reese considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, but I would not trade what we have for anything. You, Robert, this baby coming, you are my life now. The mountains will always be there when we want to visit, but home is here with you." Their second child, a daughter they named Emma Rose, was born in early February during a rare cold snap that dusted the desert with snow. She had Rebecca's lighter coloring and Reese's gray eyes, and if possible, she wrapped her father even more completely around her tiny finger than Robert had. "You're getting soft," Cole teased Reese one day when he caught his friend making silly faces to get Emma to smile. "Absolutely," Reese agreed without shame, and I could not be happier about it. The years passed peacefully. Robert grew into a strong, curious boy who loved following his father around and learning everything he could about horses, tracking, and surviving in the wild. Emma was gentler, preferring books and drawing, though she could ride as well as any boy her age. The boarding house prospered under Rebecca and Reese's management. They became pillars of the Castle Dome community, respected and liked by nearly everyone. Reese even agreed to serve a term as town marshal when Marshal Hawkins retired, though he declined to run for a second term, preferring to return to his trail patrol work. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Reese took Rebecca back up to the cabin in the mountains. Thomas and Mary, who now had 2 children of their own, watched Robert and Emma for the week. Standing on the cabin porch at sunset, wrapped in Reese's arms, Rebecca reflected on their life together. "Did you ever imagine, when you caught me that day, that we would end up here?" she asked. "I imagined a lot of things in that moment," Reese admitted, "but even my wildest imaginings did not come close to how good our life together actually is." "You saved me, Rebecca. I was a man going through the motions of living, hiding from the world. You brought me back to life." "We saved each other," Rebecca corrected. "I was just as lost as you were. You gave me hope again, showed me that I could trust someone, that I could love and be loved without fear." They stood in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. Somewhere in the valley below, an owl called out, and the evening breeze carried the scent of pine and sage. "Do you think we will grow old together?" Rebecca asked. "I intend to," Reese said. "I plan on spending the next 40 or 50 years with you, watching our children grow up and have children of their own, making memories and loving you more every single day." "That sounds perfect." Years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges, but also joy and contentment. Robert grew into a young man who inherited his father's size and strength, but his mother's way with people. He took over much of the boarding house work as Rebecca and Reese grew older. Emma married a school teacher and moved to Tucson, where she started a school of her own. She and her husband visited regularly, bringing their children to meet their grandparents. Thomas and Mary stayed in the area, their children becoming close with Robert and Emma. The extended family gatherings were loud, chaotic, and filled with love. Reese, now in his 60s with more gray in his hair and beard but still strong and capable, often sat on the boarding house porch with Rebecca, watching the world go by. They held hands the way they always had, their love undiminished by time. "I've been thinking," Reese said one evening, "maybe we should sell the boarding house to Robert and his wife. They are running it anyway at this point. We could spend more time up at the cabin, enjoy our remaining years together without so much responsibility." Rebecca considered it. "I think I would like that. The cabin was always special to us. It would be nice to have more time there. But only if you are sure. I do not want you to feel like I am dragging you away from the life you built." "We built," Rebecca corrected. "Everything we have, we built together. And wherever you are is where I want to be." They sold the boarding house to Robert, who was delighted to continue the family business. He had married a capable young woman named Sarah, and together they would keep the Quinton boarding house thriving. Rebecca and Reese moved permanently to the mountain cabin, making the trip down to Castle Dome every few months to visit family and friends. The cabin had been expanded and improved over the years, and it was cozy and comfortable. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Rebecca and Reese renewed their wedding vows. The celebration was held at the cabin, with everyone camping in the valley for a long weekend. Standing before their assembled family, Reese took Rebecca's hands in his. His voice was still strong, though age had added gravel to its depth. 50 years ago I caught you before you hit the ground, and I have been holding on to you ever since. You are my heart, my home, my reason for everything good in my life. I love you today as much as I did then more, if that is possible. Thank you for choosing me, for staying with me, for building this beautiful life together. Rebecca, tears streaming down her weathered but still lovely face, replied, You caught me and you saved me. But more than that, you loved me. You showed me what true partnership means, what real strength looks like, what it means to be cherished. I would choose you again every single day. I love you, Reese Quinton, now and forever. They kissed while their family cheered, and in that moment, surrounded by love and legacy, both felt complete contentment. Several more peaceful years passed. Reese and Rebecca spent their days enjoying the quiet beauty of the mountains, receiving visits from their children and grandchildren, and simply being together. They took walks in the valley, sat by the stream, and spent evenings on the porch watching sunsets that never lost their magic. One autumn evening, as they sat together with blankets wrapped around them against the cooling air, Rebecca rested her head on Reese's shoulder. Do you remember the day we met? She asked. That split second when I was falling and you caught me? I remember everything about that day. The color of the sky, the sound of your horse, the feel of you in my arms. I knew in that instant my life had just changed forever. Mine too. I tell people you saved my life, but it is more than that. You gave me a life worth living, a love worth having, a family worth building. We gave that to each other. Reese pressed a kiss to the top of her head. I used to think I was meant to be alone. Turns out I was just waiting for the right person to share everything with. They sat in peaceful silence as stars emerged in the darkening sky, the same stars that had shone on their wedding night and every night since. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life full of meaning and love, who had created a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. The mountain wind whispered through the pines, and in the valley below, a coyote called out to the rising moon. Rebecca and Reese held each other close, grateful for every moment they had been given, for the chance encounter on a dangerous trail that had led to a lifetime of happiness. Their story, which began with a fall and a catch, had become something greater than either could have imagined. It was a testament to the power of love to heal, to transform, to endure. It was proof that sometimes the best things in life come when you least expect them, when you are willing to take a chance on someone different, someone unexpected. And as they sat together under the stars, surrounded by the wild beauty of the mountains they both loved, Rebecca and Reese knew with certainty that they had lived a good life, a full life, a life rich with love. The mountain man who had once hidden from the world and the woman who had been afraid to trust again had found everything they needed in each other. Their love story, born in a moment of danger and saved by quick reflexes and courage, had blossomed into something extraordinary. It would be remembered by their descendants for generations, a tale of true love found in the Wild West, of two hearts that beat as one, of a life well lived together. And that, they both agreed as they held each other close under the vast western sky, was the best possible ending to their story, except it was not really an ending at all. It was simply another evening in a lifetime of evenings, another moment in a love that transcended time, another heartbeat in the rhythm of a life they had built together, one precious day at a time.